We can. Thank you. So this video will go up on the city's website as well as the Mystic River Watershed Association's website, and that's so that folks who couldn't make it here tonight can catch up later. I also wanted to say, while this is on Zoom, we would love for it to feel a little more interactive and participatory. So while I do have everybody on mute right now, you know, as we're going through this, if you have a question, feel free to unmute and speak. Feel free to raise your hand. Along the bar at the bottom, there should be some icons that allow you to raise your hand. Feel free to put questions in the chat. But again, we want to encourage people to participate and interact as if we were actually in real life here. I'll also do a quick land acknowledgement. City of Woburn is on Pawtucket land, so if we can just take a moment to acknowledge the land and the history. And finally, before we jump into kind of introductions, I wanted to just give a quick overview of today. So it's 6:30 now. We're hoping to wrap this up in an hour or less. So we're going to start out with introductions. We will from there kind of talk a little bit about funding and how we got here and how we got here. And then we're going to talk about community engagement and sort of what we've heard from you all so far. And from there, I will turn it over to our design team, Jen from Horsley Witten, and she will talk about and actually share with us a drawing or a design of sort of a possibility for this site based on what we heard from you all. So with that, Mayor Galvin, do you want to kick us off and start the round of introductions?
Thanks, Catherine. I'll do it quick because I know we want to keep this program to an hour. And it's more important that we hear from the neighbors and butters, residents about what they want to see. So quickly, just wanted to say I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and also May 10th for the tours and the walkthrough. And it was a really, I thought it was a great day to get some input from the neighbors about some of the things that they would like to see. And that's part of what tonight's meeting is, to give feedback about what we heard and to continue to be a great asset for the neighborhood and all the residents of the city of Woburn. So I'm grateful to all of you for your participation, and I'm going to introduce some of the other people here today. Of course, we've got Jeff Dillon, who's been working really hard on this. He's the Ward 3 Alderman. He'll be able to say a few words. Jay Corey, the city engineer. I know some of you were out there would have remembered him from his tours. He was very enlightening and engaging. And also Rory Lindstrom, the Recreation Department Director. Land in the city under her jurisdiction. She does a great job. So right now, turn it back to Catherine. And Catherine, you can let Jeff go. And then Jay and Rory, if they'd like to say something, we'll get right into the program. So thank you.
Perfect. Jeff, Rory, or Jay, do you want to just unmute and say a quick hello so folks can put a name with a face?
Sure, I'll go.
Yep. So go ahead, Rory.
Oh, thanks, Jay. My name is Rory Lindstrom, the Recreation Director here in the City of Woburn. We're really excited about this project. I hope that all the residents know that if they have any questions at all, feel free to call us at the rec office, but we're excited about all the participation that we've had so far with this. So my number's always open, the door's always open for anybody to come call and talk. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jay Corey, I'm the city engineer. I'd just like to thank Catherine and her crew from the Mystic River Watershed who are funding this initiative, and it helps us in the city get this program off the ground. Thank you.
Jeff, you want to say a quick hello?
Sure. Jeff Dillon, Ward 3 Alderman. Just want to say thank you to Mayor Galvin, Jay, Catherine, and Rory. We had a great turnout for the walking tour, and a lot of good feedback. And now's the time to get your 2 cents in, and let's make this a project that's not just good for us, but for the future of our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And Jen from Horsley Witten, our design team, you want to just unmute and say a quick hello? Again, with putting a face to the name.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jennifer Belsab. I'm a senior water resources engineer with Horsley Witten Group. I've been working on this project with Myra for the last 6 months we've been working with the city of Woburn for several years now and gotten to know Jay and other folks, and we're really excited about this project. My colleague Matt Lehman is on the line. He's going to be note-taking today and possibly answering some of our questions. And anyways, I'm hoping we get a lot of good feedback tonight. Thank you.
Jen, thank you. And thank you, everybody. So, whoops, going too quickly. So before we kind of dive into what we heard from you, I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge the funding we got here. So this funding came from the Massachusetts MVP program, which is Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. So basically, it's state money to help communities prepare for essentially climate change. And we got this money through the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, which is a collaborative that's hosted by the Mystic River Watershed Association. And it's basically the 21 communities of the watershed. You can see Woburn's right up here, coming together again to work on climate resilience. So I just want to take one moment to sort of speak to how we got here. So basically Woburn is an active member of the Upper Mystic Working Group as part of the RMC. So that basically means all these communities above the Amelia Earhart Dam came together, formed a working group in order again to work towards climate resilience. And the working group's specific goal is working on managing precipitation-based flooding. So this group has been active for the last few years. We work on, identifying goals, writing work plans, and most importantly, securing a good amount of funding. So the first round of funding allowed the group to really focus in on, what's flooding going to look like over the next 50 years and what are some good tools for managing that flooding. The next round really dug in on the tools and in particular on constructed wetlands. So the idea of building wetlands, restoring wetlands, and improving open space, which does a lot of great things, but one of the things that it does do is also it can hold water when we have a big rainstorm. Then the next round of funding sort of said, okay, if we look, in this area, the Upper Mystic, part of the watershed, where are good places for these open space improvements and wetland improvements? And of course, the big reveal is that we went from 400 possible sites to the top 3 really most suitable sites for something like this, and Hurld Park was one of those top sites. So last summer, we, along with Woburn and the other communities in the Upper Mystic, applied for and secured a good chunk of funding from the MVP program. And so over the last 9 months, we've been working on community engagement. So really hearing from you all about, how do you see this space and how would you like to use it? And then to do community engagement, some design, as well as preliminary permitting. And that's where we are now. Oops, sorry about that. So I wanted to, before I turn this over to Jen, I just wanted to speak a little bit to what we've heard so far from you all. So, we've really made a concerted effort to get out and hear from neighbors and abutters and residents of Woburn about, how are you using this space currently and how would you like to use this space? So we put out a survey, shout out to Rory for getting almost 500 people replying to that survey. As Mayor Galvin mentioned, we had an open house a few weeks ago that was really well attended. There's also been information on social media, and I know that Jeff in particular, as well as Mayor Galvin and Rory and Jay, have been out pounding the pavement and talking to people and really trying to hear from people, what they think about this space. And then we're then taking all that information and making sure it makes it to Jen and others on the design team so that that can really inform the design. So first I want to talk a bit briefly about the survey. As I said, almost 500 people responded, and you might be wondering, who exactly are these people? So, as you can see from these pie charts, almost all the people who responded are from Woburn. 2/3 have lived in Woburn over 10 years, and, almost 80, roughly 85% have lived in Woburn at least 5 years. So these really are, medium to long-term Woburn residents. So what we heard from you, whoops, sorry about that. In terms of how the space is being used now, the top answer was walking and running. So people like the path. About a third of people were talking about children. So clearly this space is used by families, and there are families in the abutting neighborhood and parents and grandparents. About a quarter mentioned biking. About 20% talked about nature and wildlife. And then people also mentioned relaxing, playing sports, socializing, picnicking. And then in terms of how, the other big question we asked is, how would you like to use this space? So the top answered on that was, improved walking and biking paths. So almost 80% of people all said that. Playground was the next, highest answer, almost 70% of people. So again, to that, clearly there's a lot of families who either use or would like to use this space. Half the people said nature, enjoying nature. People also mentioned gathering spaces, mentioned sports related amenities. And then in terms of the open house, we had almost 80 people show up for that open house, which was really great, especially in this post-COVID world. It was great to see so many people come out. So, we did a series of walks. And again, we asked that question, how are you using the space and how would you like to use the space? And I just wanted to share a few of the responses we got, so areas for sitting and play, informal sports, maybe a small tot lot, birds and wildlife, walking paths, nature, educational signage, walking trails, again, areas to stop and sit. And we did get a few no thank you in terms of the dog park. So improved stream and wetlands. Some people talked about the invasives that were there, the plants that were kind of taking over. Maybe workout area, public bathrooms. Again, people came back to birds, wildlife, trees, native plants, pollinator garden. And then we did definitely hear a number of people talking about expressing concern about either basement flooding or overland flooding. So this is something that Jen and the team will be addressing and talking more about. So at this point, I would love to turn it over to Jen to go ahead and talk a little bit about how all this feedback, was integrated into the plan and the design. And unless there's any burning questions, I think we're going to go right to Jen and Horsley Witten, and then maybe once we're done looking at the design, we'll open it up for questions. So Jen, you want to go ahead? And I think you're on mute.
Always happens. Okay, hold on. All right, can you see that all right?
Yep.
All right, awesome. Welcome everybody. Like I said, we're really excited to be here tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of a brief overview of the work that Horsley Witten Group has done to date through this project, from our sort of desktop analyses all the way through our field work. And then today, we'll end with the concept and sort of getting back to what you've sort of said to us from your public feedback. Horsley Witten Group was brought on through the MVP grant, like Catherine mentioned, and our scope here sort of consists of 4 different elements. One is the site gathering, information gathering, site analysis portion, which began in February and went through March. And during that time, we collected a lot of information, historical plans, reports, photographed, anecdotal conversations with the city and staff, and was able to start there with gathering a really high level understanding of what the situation at Hurld Park is, again, who uses it, what's going on there. And then public feedback, as Catherine mentioned, and from that public feedback and our information, we've developed a conceptual design, which we'll show you today. And from tonight, moving forward through the end of the month, we'll be working on finalizing our preliminary design plans, which the city will be able to use moving forward for additional grant opportunities and to get additional funding. So I'll talk now a little bit about the history of the site. These are some historical aerials that we collected through the process of our desktop analyses. And this is just to help give a little bit of context to the site over time. This Woburn in general, but this area also was had agricultural land and had industry and commercial on it. It is heavily human influence in terms of development. In terms of the stream, you can kind of see how the stream is very much straightened here. It's a connection. The current Cummings Brook is actually a connection, a man-made connection from the Middlesex Canal, and was dredged and has been dredged over time. You'll see in the photo, in the 1955 photo, that the school is just starting to be built. And in 1963, that pretty much is the same, except for we're starting to see a little bit of a wetland area, that wetland that exists there now sort of forming in that place. In 1969, one sort of key part there is you can kind of see the development to the west portion of the site, where the stream is once again just changed a little bit so that they could get the crossing from Sheridan across to this other side, and that was culverted. And then 1995 there, you can kind of see now all of that sort of agricultural area in the vicinity is starting to sort of disappear, and you see what is mostly there now today, which is the surrounding residential area. And this is a Google a Google photo, aerial photo of the site today, which consists of the the former Hurld Elementary School to the south on Bedford Road, and then sort of Hurld Park broadly to the north, which incorporates that wetland that I mentioned, which is still here today, and then Cumming Brook as it sort of turns and goes through the site. And that northern portion is mostly wooded. So that sort of gives a little bit of background to the site, and now I'll talk a little bit about what we've seen. So our site analysis consists of various elements. Obviously, as we sort of look at the whole site, we look at different parts of it. Horsley Witten Group is sort of a sustainable water resources, stormwater minded engineering firm, and so that is a lot of what we do. So one of our big first elements is sort of looking at the existing waterways and wetlands and starting to see like how those are functioning, what is the health of those, where are they going, where's the water coming from and going to, how is the health of the trees, how is the health of the habitat existing on site. But we also look at sort of connectivity, access to the site. So we have Bedford Road to the north, to the south. This is a sort of a tilted bird's eye here. Sheridan Street to the north. And we have access between those two roads with the existing asphalt path that runs on the east side of the property. We also have access for pedestrians. There's a sidewalk on Bedford Road that allows for people to access the site in that way. Same with Sheridan. There's actually footpaths and tracks. We saw through the survey and visually by observations that there are a lot of sort of walking and biking paths through this Hurld Park wooded portion. But there's also access from the residential area. So Elijah, the back portions of those homes and the back portions of the homes on Bamberg, there are connections from those sites as well. Really great opportunities and view sheds from the sort of Hurld school, which is raised slightly as compared to some other portions of the site. So if you're on the backside of that school, you can get really great views of the wetland. And also there's great opportunities as you're walking down Sheridan, from my experience, sort of looking into that stream and seeing the health. And what I'll do now is sort of show you some of the pictures from our site visits. And so the conditions, one of the first things, like I said, we mentioned is sort of stormwater, water resources, wetlands, and waterways. What do those look like and how healthy they are? So we went through and sort of cataloged, sort of photo documented and geolocated some of these locations. So the wetland, as I mentioned, fairly healthy. The stream We noticed there's obviously a lot of debris and materials, some erosion and undercutting. There's two culverts or over the roads, like I mentioned, on Sheridan Street. There's one big head wall there, and then on Bamberg, there's a connection there. When we were out there after a rain event, we noticed that there's definitely some ponding in this area. And we looked also at sort of, as somebody had mentioned, flooding conditions upstream, up at Wynn and Hart as well, even though that was not in our project zone, just to get a sense of what's going on in the area. Speaking of vegetation, we heard a lot from the survey, folks in the survey, and from the feedback that we got at the open house. There's a lot of invasive species out there, and a lot of management that people want to see. So just to give you a sense of what we saw out there, it's pretty dominated by multiflora rose. So these are the sort of green viney with the prickly thorns. A lot of that out there. Winter creeper, that's also in this left photo here in the background, also is an invasive species. The trees, for the most part, consist of Norway maple and black locust. We do see a lot of oriental bittersweet. So for those who are on Sheridan Street or pass by that, you'll see a lot of vining sort of cutting into those trees. That is oriental bittersweet. There's Japanese knotweed. That's a very prominent invasive species. That's a lot, mostly on the school side. And then along the path itself, we did see a lot of down trees. Again, this seems to be from undercutting, possibly just from over time as the stream has changed slightly. Circulation and access, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's that asphalt path that connects Sheridan Street to Bedford. There were several footpaths and tracks, bike tracks through the site. And this upper right-hand photo is the access from Sheridan into the woods. There's obviously, like I said, access from Sheridan Street on both ends. And then there is some residential access through gates and just open backyards. And finally, with the former Hurld school, we looked at sort of, what are the amenities on that site? There's obviously open asphalt for play there. There are some sort of open lawns and structure areas. There is parking available. So for those who visit the site, you can park there even though it's not active. It is mostly for cars accessible off of Bedford Street now, like I said, with that parking lot. But I think there are, like I said, there are sidewalks on that as well. That allow pedestrians to sort of enter that space. And so that sort of is a broad picture of what we saw on site. But to give you a little bit of context to this site relative to what's available around, we did a little bit of site analyses to look at sort of what's within your 5-minute, 10-minute, your 20 to 25-minute walk. And you can see in terms of site amenities, open space and conservation areas, we have within a 5-minute walk, not really that much in terms of open space and nature. So we can kind of see from that for those folks who are in the area and use the area that, this site could really be an amenity to you. Even broadening that out a little bit within the half-mile radius or a 10-minute walk, we've got Rag Rock Hill Park, which I think is well used, and then Johnson Park. But that, again, is kind of is the end of what you can get in the 10 minutes. Now, once you go a little bit further out that mile, a lot more opportunities are open. But in terms of sort of what is in this residential area and who might be using it, we recognize at this point that a lot of sort of the neighborhood, the residents are going to be using it, and thinking about that as we move forward with the concept is important to the family nature of the space. So Catherine mentioned a lot of really good key feedback that we got, and I'm just summarizing it here with sort of some of the visuals connecting those words. So we heard pathways, accessible pathways and trails, nature, native plants or invasive species removal, accessible play and playgrounds, sports amenities, and some gathering spaces. So these are the sort of the foundations of what we heard from you, and then bringing that together with what we sort of saw. I'm going to now present basically our concept idea, and I'm going to split it into two ideas. One being the open space improvements and the site amenities, and the other being sort of the ecological restoration piece, which is sort of dealing with the waters and resource areas second, and then I'll open it up after that for discussion. So for open space improvements, I'll start from sort of Sheridan to the south. So there'll be access to the site off of Sheridan Street, mainly at the northeast portion of the site. The concept currently incorporates limited parking for four parking spaces, parallel parking spaces, two which will be handicap accessible or more, depending on the discussion. There'd be a gathering area at the northwest portion of the site that would allow for seating, maybe a small park, just to allow people who are in the area to sort of gather in this open space. Surrounding the outside, the exterior of the property is an accessible, permeable path. And I'll give an image to show you what that means in a second. And that is connected through the space with boardwalks throughout to be able to meander through the site. And then coming sort of towards the southeast, there are overlooks in various places, so allowing people to sort of have a moment to stop and relax and sort of enjoy nature at various locations. And that sort of moving southward connects you into sort of the more park portion of this concept design. So reusing the former Hurld school area to incorporate some of the things that we heard. So we have and are showing sort of open fields for active recreation. So not formal ball fields or basketball courts, but sort of maybe a soccer type situation there. We do have and are showing sort of a sports area. Right now it's showing as like a half basketball court. This could also be, you know, a hockey location or something else like pickleball. We just haven't sort of formalized that yet and are looking for feedback. This area here is we are calling an inclusive nature playground. So this would have sort of a more nature-esque feel to it in terms of the structures. We have for gathering spaces, we have a pavilion here. This also could serve as the trailhead with educational opportunities to give people some history, some background to the site, of course, it being the former elementary school. And then lastly, to the south, there would also be access off of Bedford Road, and we would incorporate a parking lot that would be able to be consistent with what's sort of there now and have access to the paths that way. To give you a sense of what these sort of look like I said, accessible paths. Sorry, Catherine, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but there is a little feedback. I wonder if you want to try without the earphones.
Hold on a second. How about now? Better or not?
I think that is better. Yeah, thank you, Jen.
It's better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the accessible path, there's a photo in the upper right showing the permeable pathways that we're intending to use with the shoulder to allow people to more broadly access and stop as they go along the routes. There's a boardwalks, as I mentioned, so being able to again be sort of immersed in the site. Overlooks, gathering and seating area. So I'm showing a pavilion here, so allowing that to be an area and space where you can sort of possibly have picnics or gather with your family. Wayfinding and signage, using the opportunity here to educate people about, maybe that, like I said, the history of the site and possibly, the nature of the site being, agricultural and such. Accessible playgrounds, we want to definitely have an ability to have playgrounds that could be accessible to all, but also have those be sort of, again, more nature-esque, so not necessarily a full structure. And then again, the parking, to have people be able to drive to these locations. So even though we'd obviously focus on local residents, having it be a destination for the city. Okay, so the ecological restoration portion, like I mentioned earlier, the stream currently, the Cummings Brooks currently goes south and takes a turn from Sheridan, sort of a 90-degree turn under Bamberg. And what we want to do is restore the meandering of the stream as we would have seen it if it was more natural. And with that, restoring some of the floodplain. So basically connecting that stream to the surrounding area, connecting it to the habitat. And then we would manage the invasives on site and sort of replace those to the extent possible with native trees and plants. And then on the northeastern portion of the site, Catherine mentioned water quality being very important to this project. And so we would incorporate constructed stormwater wetland here to manage some of the stormwater that's coming to Sheridan, that's also coming to Cummings Brook, upgrading of the site. There would be immersive sort of nature play or nature moments. We have in this upper right corner here, a little bit hard to see, but these are stepping stones, moments to go for people to go through this stormwater constructed wetland, but also having moments outside of that, maybe also by the nature play area where you can sort of climb trees, and I'll show a picture of that. And then finally, in terms of the nature piece of it, we heard from Jay and others that we need to keep the existing tree at the front of the school, and we're going to try to do that with this design as well. So just some images here to give you a sense of what we mean. The meandering stream, this is a photo here in the middle of sort of what stream restoration might look like, a little bit more natural, a little bit more grown in, instead of sort of a very vertical stream. And that would incorporate floodplain management as well. The stormwater constructed wetland, that's the bottom right photo here. That is basically, again, used for water quality that would mimic essentially the existing wetland that's on site today. And then immersive nature play, that's the sort of bottom right photos and upper right here. So having sort of elements of nature that kids and adults, if they want to, can climb on and experience to be a little bit more natural. And again, not as park-like as some of the other locations in the vicinity. And that leads us to our overall concept design. So this image here that I'm showing is our final image that we developed for this conversation. This is an image that we will share with you. It'll be online for you to look at and take more sort of a look at and get feedback to us as you have time. But at this point, we will open it up for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could chime in for a second, Catherine. I'm seeing a lot of good comments in the chats. The best way to get your comments in, if you haven't already submitted the same thing, we do have a lot of comments thus far, but if you could send comments to Rory, are you taking them, or is Catherine by email?
Yeah, well, we'll do that, and I think we can address some of those, and we will have a transcript of the chat.
Okay.
So we'll definitely capture these.
Yeah, and I did see one, when we did the walks, we heard a lot from people that they didn't want to see any on-street parking on Sheridan Street. And I totally understand, because the narrowness of the street. Well, we're dealing with almost 12-acre site, and I do see the need for some ADA compliant parking spaces that would be off-street, that would be perpendicular to Sheridan Street, so that we have handicap access at both the Bedford Road side as well as the Sheridan Street side. So I think we will be considering that.
Thank you, Jay. That was number one on my list. I have, so if folks feel comfortable, Jen, do we want to go back to gallery view for a second, just so we can kind of see everybody that start addressing some of these questions? And then maybe, if need be, we can share screen again and show the concept again. But so I've taken notes on some of what's in the chat. Unless anyone has a burning question, wants to raise their hand or speak out, we might start going through some of these issues. So parking, not seeing any hands. Okay, so parking was number one. So Jay, thank you for addressing that and the need for ADA compliant parking spaces. Does anybody, Jen, do you have anything to add, or can I keep moving? Okay. So the next one I saw quite a bit in the chat, and also, you know, heard at our open house, was discussion about sports fields and sort of, you know, just green fields versus a kind of dedicated sports field. So I don't know, Jen or Jay or anybody else from the city, if you want to speak a little bit to some of the conversations we've had and some of the decisions around how to incorporate informal or formal sports amenities in that upper area.
Oh, I will. So obviously, I think what people are referring to is they don't want to see a Woburn Little League game there, a Woburn Youth Soccer game there. That is not our intent at all. You know, you won't see organized sports there. We ran into the same problem when we built the new Clout Park, is that we don't have enough green space for people to go and kick the ball around, you know, or fly a kite, because a lot of our fields are used by our youth sports, and they are needed. But we do not need a new baseball field there, and Woburn Youth Soccer has plenty of acres. So if that's what people's fears are, that's not something that's going there. However, it will be an open space for the residents to use, and we can't tell our Woburn residents that they can't go play there. So you might see, you know, 10 people going and using and kicking the ball around on an unorganized manner. But as far as our plans right now, there is no plans for a Woburn Little League field, lacrosse field, or anything else there. So hopefully that alleviates some concerns for some of the neighbors as well.
Just to follow up on Rory said, it is a very big site, and there is no intention for organized sports there, but there's a great opportunity for us to make a mix and to try to balance that mix. So some sporting activity is a good thing there, I think. It's just a matter of getting the right balance, and that's hearing back from some of the neighbors about some definite no that they don't want. That's important, but you know, at the walkthrough on the 10th, there were some parents with younger kids, not, you know, middle-aged, you know, middle school kids who do need places to go to play and to have some constructive sports, but not organized sports. But, you know, that's why there's been discussion about maybe a, you know, basketball court. We talked one similar to, if people have been at the Hurld Wyman, it's a net, like a 3-point, you know, like a 3-on-3 basketball court. It's not a full court, but just a place kids could go and practice. You know, it's not, you know, you wouldn't see organized games there, but that's something that's on the drawing board. It doesn't mean it's going to make it to the final cut, but, you know, we just have to remember we get one shot at this. It's a big lot, and we want to make a, you know, something that's good for the residents and the city as a whole, because, you know, parks and recreation are important to everybody who makes a decision to come live in the city, and that's what we like to do. So that's just part of it. But we have a long way to go.
Catherine, one point, if I may. Mayor Galvin and Roy hit the nail right on the head when they explained that no, shall we say, organized sports. My wife and I took my grandson about a week ago to fly a kite, and we drove down to the Joyce looking for the openest, largest area to fly a kite. And of course, there was all kinds of soccer games. We ended up right down at the Hurld School. And again, that's the kind of what I see, the vision there, open space. Somebody wants to throw the baseball with their kids, or maybe a coach even wants to go down there and take 5 or 6 of his kids and have an informal practice, but nothing with formal goalposts or anything like that. I do want to mention as well, I see State Rep Haggerty has logged on and has been with us, and he not only is our state rep, but he's also an abutter and part of the neighborhood community and has been very supportive of this. So thank you, State Rep Haggerty.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And thank all of you for those comments. Pam, I see your hand is up. Do you want to unmute and weigh in?
Sure. I live right across the street from the Johnson Park, which is a pocket park on Willow Street. And that is an underused park. And I would suggest using that space for some open space. I mean, it just has a slide and a sandbox and a bouncy toy. Divert some of that, pickleball or kick around space to Johnson Park. We have such few opportunities to create or protect natural areas. This feels like a grocery store. Oh, here's a little nature, here's a picnic thing, here's this, here's that. And, it fits everything on our agenda. It doesn't, it's like, here, kids, this is sort of supermarket nature. This is a natural kind of toy. I'm sorry, if I'm going to take the kids into the woods, I'm going to say, this is a maple leaf. This is how you tell what it is. This is an acorn. This belongs to an oak tree. This is this kind of mushroom. Do you know how you can tell a hawk? Okay, that kind of stuff is best done from person to person and not through sort of learning toys. This sort of design, I'll be glad to see walking paths, because I've been wanting to get down towards the stream. I'm very interested in the history of the stream. I'd love it if there were signs telling the history of the space.
Yeah, and we'll definitely include that.
And I'd love to see, the stream, cleanup, as a citywide thing. But please, if you're going to, take the opportunity, plant pollinator plants, make this a natural area first where people are invited in.
Thank you, Pam. In the meantime, I'm going to move over to Erica. I see you also have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Pam. See, this was really interesting to hear in the beginning when you showed the maps that this is a created space by humans, right? It really is. And that is something we need to continue. I agree with Pam about educating about nature live. And can I just say, Lisa, was that you? Jennifer, thank you so much, because you talked about all the possibilities, which was your assignment, which was to show all the possibilities that could happen, right? Is that correct? That's your job. And we need to pick and choose from that itemized list and think about nature. I'm looking at it. I'm on 21 Elijah Street. It would be sad if I saw like a Disney World thing going on there. And Pam, to your point, I know that's what you meant. I don't think it's going to go that far. I think we're hearing about possibilities in this meeting, which is fabulous. And we're hearing about protecting the environment, which is fabulous. I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Jen or anybody from the city, is there any pieces you wanted to respond to there, or should I move on to some of the other items that were in the chat?
You can move on.
Good here.
Perfect, thank you. So we talked a bit about parking, we talked a bit about sports. There was a comment in the chat asking about paths. And so I was wondering, Jen, this might be a good one for you. I can pull up the exact comment, or you could kind of speak just a little bit to your thinking behind where the pathways went. I think there was a fear, sometimes it's hard looking at the concept that there were too many paths. So if you want to speak a bit, again, just what was your thinking behind laying out the path network?
Yeah, so I mean, the paths are intended to provide sort of an immersive nature experience. We had intended them to be sort of at the periphery of the site. Somebody, I think, asked about property lines. This obviously is still in conceptual design, so I don't have further information, but we would obviously continue to have a buffer as currently exists on the site. But the paths, again, are intended to, we heard a lot, I can't remember the percentage of people commenting that they wanted to have trails through the system. And so we created, I think, I think enough to be able to connect through the space, and again, to those immersive experiences. And the path material is going to be something natural, so that, you know, sort of fits more naturally within the space, typical of our, you know, conservation areas. Not an asphalt path, not intended to be engineered. And the boardwalks similarly would be sort of wooden structures that would be allowed to be consistent with the nature of the space.
Thank you.
Jen, can you just mention that all of the paths, even though they're natural or boardwalks, they're still required to meet ADA compliance. So these trails have to be fully ADA compliant throughout the site. So there is a lot of engineering that does go into these to be sure that we meet that requirement.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So next, there were a couple different questions asking about the thinking behind bathrooms, water fountains, lighting. And there was also a question about whether there would be times in the day that the park is closed. I'm wondering if Jay or others for the city, this maybe is a good one for you, or Jen, feel free to hop in.
Mary,
You know, I think like with all parks, we do close them down at a certain time, so there's no entrance after dark. That, you know, I think that'd probably be reasonable over there. Only a consideration, you know, the ones that you fill up with a bottle. Bathrooms, we haven't made a decision on those. We you know, initially I would say we're not going to be doing bathrooms, but again, there's something we can always discuss. But right now we're leaning away from doing the bathrooms.
yeah, all of our parks close at dusk. So, I mean, anybody that's at a park at dark without lights on, you know, that becomes a policing issue. That's when you have to contact the police. So.
Yeah, and I'll just speak to the lighting piece. A lot of these types of parks, we would not recommend lighting due to the nature of the habitat that would exist, or that we are trying to have exist in that space. So not to encourage use at night, but also not to harm habitat in that space.
Thank you, everybody. That's helpful. Which is actually a good segue to the next question. There are a couple questions in the chat asking about wildlife. Somebody asked specifically about the coyotes. And then there was one question about, so I think there's a general question about, can we speak a bit more to wildlife and habitat? Maybe even spelling out what percent, you know, what portion of the site is going to be the sort of more natural, and is the natural area now, but will be a more restored natural area. And then there was another question about why not let sort of Mother Nature take its course versus us going in and engineering it. So if maybe somebody wants to speak to that as well, please.
I'll speak a little bit to the last. I'll work backwards with the comments. as I sort of showed in the upfront portion of the presentation, this is sort of a man-made parcel. It's been sort of created and recreated over time. And I only showed from 1950s on. Actually, there are a lot of really good, I got myself into a rabbit hole with history with this site. And Matt knows this because we talked a little about this from the 1800s on. It's gone through a lot of revisions, so it is no longer sort of natural as it was. So what's there now is engineered, and what you're seeing are sort of these what they call primary species, or just sort of whatever grows there. And these are invasive species for the most part, things that can take up in all conditions, under all soils, under all environments. And that's why what's there now, like I mentioned, is mostly invasive. So as far as habitat is concerned as well, we did go out and do a habitat evaluation. Our wetland scientist is not here tonight to answer those questions specifically, but we are addressing that as part of this project to be able to incorporate some of what we saw. We did not see coyotes when we were out there. If there are some concerns about that, we'd be happy to take any further information of that and or any other sort of species you've seen on site. There are some, we saw some I can't remember, but I know that our wetland scientists did make mention of different habitat, down trees, things of that nature that we would incorporate into this. Again, it's, for as much as the existing site provides, a good forested wooded canopy, it is engineered, and it does have, a lot of sort of history to the site. There's a lot of debris dumping, waste that's been on that site. So I think a lot of what we're trying to do here is not necessarily over engineer the site, but really kind of bring it back to what it wants to be. And I encourage, there's a few local, I think Little Brook, and there's some other streams nearby that are a little bit more natural in nature with this sort of meandering and connected floodplain, that if you're interested, I can send people to maybe go see kind of what we're trying to replicate in this particular space.
Thank you, Jen, that was helpful. Okay, I'm recognizing it's 7:25, so I'm going to keep moving. There was one question about property lines and proximity to property lines. I think in particular there was a sports that half basketball court. So I was wondering if anybody wanted to speak to how close that will be to the property line.
I mean, right, like I said, right now, I mean, we would create a buffer. I don't have like a specific dimension to provide here, and what we're showing is just sort of a placeholder for some active creation. So when we get to that design phase, over the next couple of weeks as we finalize our preliminary design plans, we'll look at that a little bit more.
Thank you. Wendy, I see Wendy, you have a hand up. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Sure, I live on Rock Street, and I was noticing the placement of that basketball court is like abuts a property that has a long abuttal wall, if you will, or that particular property that abuts that is a house that's probably 25 feet from the curb, has a long driveway, and then kind of like a spaghetti shaped box property, actually. If that were my property, and I don't know, they're not obviously not here, the homeowners in that particular, but if this was my property and there was a basketball court there, I think I'd go crazy listening to balls bounce and that kind of stuff. So in the interest of speaking for that person, or at least having some consideration for that person who's not present, that's my piece. That's my 2 cents on that. I don't remember I thought the plan was really beautiful. I was really excited when I saw all the paths through the wetlands with the boardwalk. I mean, that was kind of like, literally my heart like just jumped a little bit with excitement. I did notice though from the surveys that it seemed like the playground and having a space for kids was like 70% of the people responding to the survey mentioned that was a high priority, and they didn't see a playground per se in the space that from the drawing. So yeah, I'm just going to put forth my own design here and say, can we switch that basketball out for a playground? It would be closer to the parking moms and whoever who need their, kids want to get a quick fix next to the playground, it would be very close. It would be timed, probably wouldn't be such a nuisance as basketball, and it's probably more greener space than we use basketball use court.
Yeah,
So,
Wendy, I'm gonna hop in and
thank
say
you.
there is actually, I think it was called a nature play space, but there is an area, we definitely heard that, there is an area that was dedicated to a playground. So yes, to second and third that idea.
Catherine, I want to just jump in too to say something to Wendy, that and I, it's the placeholder, and we do agree with you, the location next to the Murray's Elks is not appropriate, but it's a placeholder on the whole. Doesn't mean that the final cut. It's just something that we're putting out there as ideas. So I appreciate your comments and definitely your concern for your neighbor. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm recognizing we're coming up on time. Erica, would you like to ask a question? And then maybe I have two quick last items that we can probably quickly address.
2 seconds. What about thinking about this as an extension of the wetland that we're creating? I'm kind of thinking everything we should do around it should be about it. All I have to say.
Thank you.
Catherine, one quick question, actually 2 quick points, if I may. Just, are we able tonight to talk about the concern with the Sheridan Street folks as far as they were concerned about flooding basements, making this, what we talked about, making a better situation rather than adding to the problem? And also, I know one of the questions that a neighbor asked me, and I'm no expert, so I'll ask the experts, that adding more wetlands doesn't increase as far as a floodplain insurance. We're not increasing the floodplain in that area. I know we're running out of time, and I know that was a
Yeah,
couple of.
that was one of my last two, Jeff. So yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Jen, do you want to speak to that briefly? There was, flood insurance and water in basements, and will there be standing water? If you could speak a bit to that, I think that would be helpful.
Sure, and I think I'm just going to speak quickly, but my colleague Matt Lehman, who is the designer, is going to can talk a little bit more in detail in the chat. But we did look at all of the stormwater that is coming to the site, that is coming to Cummings Brook, and what right now it basically flows overland onto the street, from the driveways into the Cummings Brook, sort of uninhibited. What we're trying to do is actually manage that water better and allow it to be naturally treated through the site, but also have some storage in the site. So it isn't impacting the brook, and it isn't backing up. So we are actively looking right now through our site analyses, but also through some engineering modeling tools that we have to just kind of look at that. But the goal here is to improve conditions here, or at worst, keep them the same. We are not going to, cause more basement flooding, increase groundwater, have any sort of floodplain insurance requirements here. We are trying to really do some good as part of this site to manage flooding and manage stormwater.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jen. That was great. So I have 3 small ones. If people need to hop off, that's fine, but I'm going to see if we can stay a couple more minutes. The 3 final ones we haven't touched on is somebody asked about public art. So I don't know if Rory or somebody from the city could comment on that. Community gardens, somebody asked about that. So again, if somebody from the city maybe wants to talk about the different things we've heard. So public art, gardens, and then if we could end with timeline. I think we'd be in good shape. So I don't know who wants to hop on and tackle 1, 2, or 3 of those.
I think the reason why we didn't go with community gardens was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, was rodent issues or anything. I think that was a lot of the problems, is that we didn't want to, have community gardens there and then maybe have any sort of rodent issues there and have the neighbors deal with that. We also have community gardens over at Pond as well. We didn't feel like it was a good fit for this site.
Exactly. I reiterate what Rory said. Yeah, we have community gardens down at Horn Pond. It would be nice to have a small one, but again, when we deal with rodents in a neighborhood, it's problematic. So we'd rather not cause a problem to be there that wasn't there previously.
And that is what I'm hearing from the abutters as well. So just, that's pretty much what they're saying. Thank you.
So if you want a garden, put one in your backyard. Relative to the timelines, and the mayor can speak to this also, the quickest that this would happen is we have to remove the existing building. In order to do that, we have to go out to put out plans and specifications for bidding purposes. We have to engage a contractor that's qualified to do the work. Probably take about 6 to 7 months to remove the building and do any asbestos mitigation, if there is asbestos in the foundation or the tiles or the insulation, lead paint and the like, anything like that all has to be remediated. While that's being done, the mayor is looking at an earmark from a congresswoman's office that might fund the design. We have potential for additional MVP grants for the wetlands portion and the floodplain portion. We have potential for land and water grants from DCR as well as park grants. So there's a number of funding opportunities, but it's just a matter of when these funds get to us that we can proceed. But you're probably looking at a project that's going to take anywhere from 3 to 4 years.
Thank you, Jay.
Now, the mayor could say something like, I want that tomorrow and make it go quicker, but he generally doesn't. He lets things play out.
Yeah, I think it, just to follow up real quick and we'll get moving, but it is, a portion of this is going to be dependent on grant, looking at putting those pieces together. So we're at the planning stage, you know, for next summer, I would advise people, but the planning process takes. Thanks.
And I just want to call people's attention to the chat. Matt from Horsley Witten did enter, put some good answers in the chat. So if you have a minute and want to look at that. While the very last question, somebody did ask about if there were any thoughts around public art. Seems like a nice place to end this conversation. So I don't know if anybody from the city has heard anything or had any thoughts regarding public art at the site.
We haven't heard anything on that public art, but I'm sure some, we had talked about, the remnants of the, and I'm not quite sure. People asking, is it going to be a place for like a studio for art, or are we looking at just leaving some artistic footprint on that property? That's something we could look at. We talked about with a ways away, but if anyone wants to clarify that question, they can. No? All right.
We'll take that as to be continued. Somebody did point out, if you want to save the chat, click on the little box with the 3 dots and it will save to your computer. All right, I want to respect everybody's time. It's 7:35. I want to thank all of you for showing up. This was really useful. And again, to be continued. This is a very preliminary design. And the goal of this meeting was to gather feedback so we could further hone it and refine it. I want everyone to feel free to reach out to Rory, reach out to Jay, reach out to Mayor Galvin, of course, reach out to me. And of course, Jeff, who you probably live next door to, with any thoughts, comments, suggestions, because, we welcome that. I don't know, Mayor Galvin, you want to say the final goodbye?
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Jennifer, for all your hard work. I think it was another good meeting, but I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out and talk about this project, which is important to your neighborhood. And again, I say to the entire city. So thank you to everybody for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.